The planet Zavora glowed deep blue from orbit, covered in sharp mountains, floating crystal cities, and endless desert storms. It was ruled by one being, Queen Ziraven, the strongest and most feared female in the galaxy. No one dared to question her, but Queen Ziraven had one secret. Her species was dying. No child had been born to her kind in over 300 years. Not one male had succeeded in the ritual of continuance, a sacred process to create an heir. It was a private event, rarely spoken of, and always a failure. Until today. Dr. Mason Rell, a human biologist from Earth, was confused. He stood in a wide chamber made of glowing white stone. Soft humming filled the air. Around him stood tall, alien women in silver robes. None of them spoke to him. He didn't know why he had been brought here. He had arrived on Zavora 3 days earlier, part of a diplomatic science team. His job was simple: study alien DNA patterns and share Earth's medical research. Then suddenly guards had taken him from his room and brought him here, without any explanation. A high-ranking alien stepped forward. "You will step through the gate," she said. Mason blinked. What gate?" She pointed behind him. There was a glowing arch pulsing with energy. "Wait," Mason said, nervous now. "What exactly am I stepping into?" She said only one word. "Ritual." Before he could ask more, the guards moved forward. He was gently pushed toward the arch. "No blood tests? No briefing?" he muttered. "This is terrible lab protocol." Mason stepped into the light. The world shimmered, and then he was inside a different chamber. Alone. Or so he thought. Queen Ziraven stood at the center of the room. She was tall, nearly 7 feet, with violet skin, glowing silver eyes, and long tendrils in place of hair. Her presence filled the space like a storm. She turned slowly when Mason appeared, her eyes narrowed. "A human?" Mason looked around, confused. Hello?" She didn't move. "This must be a mistake," she said coldly. "You're not, Zavaran. You're not even part of the selection." Mason held up his hands. "I don't know what selection you're talking about. I was just told to step into a glowing door." Ziraven frowned. "You're not worthy." "Well, that's rude," Mason muttered. She sighed and walked toward a raised platform. "Fine," she said. "The ritual has begun. It cannot be stopped now." "I seriously don't know what's going on. Should I be worried?" Ziraven said nothing. She stepped onto the platform. Mason was guided by glowing light to stand across from her. The room shifted. A warm pulse ran through the air. Suddenly, Mason felt lightheaded. Not in pain, but like something ancient and powerful was watching him. A golden ring of energy rose around them. Ziraven raised her hand. "This is your final chance to leave, human. If you continue, the bond cannot be undone." "I don't even know what the bond is," Mason said. "But..." Her eyes locked onto his. Something inside them wasn't anger. It was pain. Maybe even desperation. He looked down at the glowing floor, then back at her. "I'm already here," he said. "Let's finish it." The chamber flashed white. Symbols spun in the air. Ziraven's body glowed softly, her skin lit with sacred lines. Mason felt heat in his chest, like a spark had passed between their hearts. Then silence. Ziraven gasped sharply. Her hand flew to her stomach. Her eyes went wide. "No, that's not possible." She looked at Mason. You did it." He blinked. "Did what?" She took a step back, fury in her voice. "The first try? You're not even Zavaran." "I have no idea what I just did," Mason replied honestly. She turned to the guards outside the chamber. "Take him away," she barked. "Now!" Mason was dragged out by stunned warriors. Behind him, Queen Ziraven stood frozen, one hand on her stomach, the other shaking, because for the first time in 3 centuries, a new life had just begun inside her, and it came from a human. Dr. Mason Rell sat inside a glowing chamber with no doors, no chairs, and no idea what was happening. He rubbed his wrist where the guards had grabbed him. The walls were smooth crystal, but somehow warm. The air smelled like burnt spices. It didn't feel like a prison, but it didn't feel safe either. He took a deep breath. "Okay," he whispered. "I was just supposed to study alien DNA, not become whatever this is." Before he could finish that thought, the wall in front of him opened, like liquid glass. A tall figure stepped through, robed in gold, eyes like molten steel. Royal High Scholar Varnix. He stared down at Mason. "You are the one," he said. Mason blinked. "The one? Who what?" "The one who completed the Queen's ritual. First attempt. Full activation. Confirmation complete." The scholar stepped closer. "You impregnated our queen." Mason stood up so fast he hit his head on the ceiling. "Hold on, what do you mean impregnated?" Varnix looked almost insulted. "Do not pretend you are unaware. The Queen's body never responds to false matches. Your biology was compatible in a way we cannot explain. I didn't even know it was a fertility ceremony." Mason snapped. "I thought I was donating blood." Two more guards entered, female warriors, tall and armored. They eyed him like a wild animal. One whispered, "He did it. A human did what no Zavaran male has done in 300 cycles." The other whispered back, "Is that power? Or corruption?" Varnix raised a hand. "Enough. Bring him to the Court of Mines. The Queen will speak there, and so will he." Mason frowned. "Can someone at least give me a sandwich first?" No one laughed. The Court of Mines was vast and cold. Columns floated in the air. Light flowed upward, instead of down. Hundreds of Zavaran nobles sat on high platforms, glowing eyes fixed on Mason. In the center stood Queen Ziraven. She was no longer glowing from the ritual. She was calm now, cold, beautiful, terrifying. "Bring the human forward," she said. Mason was led to a glowing platform before her throne. "I want the truth," she said. "What are you?" "I'm a biologist," he replied. "From Earth. Do your people engineer fertility into your blood?" "What? No." She narrowed her eyes. "Then how did your seed awaken mine?" Mason threw his hands up. "I didn't even know that's what was happening." The nobles began whispering across the hall. "He's lying. No, he's too simple. Could he be some kind of Terran weapon?" Ziraven raised her hand and silenced them all. She stepped down from her throne, walked slowly toward Mason. Her eyes never left his. "You changed me," she said softly. "My blood is stronger. My senses sharper. My body is creating life. But you are nothing special." "Thank you," Mason muttered sarcastically. She stopped inches from him. "I don't know whether to reward you or remove you." He stared into her glowing silver eyes. "I didn't ask for any of this," he said. "But I'm not running. If there's a child, it's mine too. I won't walk away from it." That made her freeze. For a queen who feared nothing, those words hit differently. In the shadows, Varnix whispered to another noble. He didn't challenge her. He didn't bow. He simply stood. "Like an equal," the others said, shaking their head. "No one speaks to her like that." Ziraven turned away. "Take him to the deep chambers," she ordered. "Let the scientists study him." Mason frowned. "Hey, I'm not a lab rat." She paused, then looked over her shoulder. "And if you survive them, then perhaps we'll talk again." As guards led him out, Mason glanced back one last time and saw something he didn't expect. Queen Ziraven touching her stomach, not with fear, but with confusion. Deep beneath the glowing cities of Zavora, the Queen's science vault hummed with ancient power. Inside it, walls pulsed with blue light. Strange machines moved on their own. And in the middle of it all, Dr. Mason Rell stood inside a containment ring, blinking under a dozen scanners. He was shirtless, hooked to cables, surrounded by alien scientists, all female, all silent, except one. Lead Biogen Kalira, her white robes marked with the Queen's sigil, studied Mason like he was some strange puzzle. "You are not genetically enhanced," she said. "Nope," Mason replied. "Pretty average back home. Your DNA is unstable, yet somehow fertile, fast, dominant." Mason frowned. "That doesn't sound flattering." She didn't blink. "It is not." Meanwhile, Queen Ziraven stood above in her royal chamber. She clenched her fists. Her mind was chaos. One moment, she wanted the human destroyed. The next, she felt a strange heat in her chest, like his presence had left something behind beyond the child. Not love, not weakness, but change. And she hated change. Her generals shouted in council, "This human is dangerous. He defiled the sacred rite. He must be used." Studied, then erased. Only Varnix the scholar spoke differently. "He may be our solution." Down in the vault, Mason sat on a bench as the last test ended. His voice was tired. "Look, I didn't mean to break your biology or history or whatever this is. But if you want to keep poking me with cold instruments, at least bring snacks." Kalira narrowed her eyes. "You joke during genetic analysis?" "I joke when I'm nervous," he said, "and when I'm surrounded." She studied him, then surprised him. "You are not like our males." Mason chuckled. "I hope not. I think they hate me." "No," she said. "They fear you." Later, that day Mason was moved to a resting chamber. Not a prison, but not free either. He sat by the window staring out at Zavora's twin moons. When the door opened, he didn't look up. "You again?" he said. "What now? Blood, sweat, or tears?" But it wasn't a scientist. It was Queen Ziraven. He stood quickly. She entered like a storm, tall, glowing faintly, her eyes unreadable. "I expected you to be weaker," she said. "I expected you to yell more," he replied. She didn't smile, but she also didn't strike. "I have questions," she said. He nodded. "Ask." For the next hour she paced the room while he answered her calmly. No, he didn't plan to bond. No, he didn't understand Zavaran fertility. Yes, he would take responsibility for the child. Her eyes flickered at that. "Why?" she asked. "It is inside me, not you." He looked at her. "Because it's part of me too. You don't walk away from that." Silence. Ziraven turned her back. "My own people wish to destroy you. I should want the same." Mason leaned against the wall. "Do you?" She turned slightly and said nothing. Back in her chamber, Ziraven looked at her reflection. She touched her stomach again, and for the first time, she didn't feel fury. She felt something more dangerous. Hope. The chamber was dim and silent. Queen Ziraven stood alone near a large viewing screen. Storms swirled outside across the dark sky of Zavora. Lightning cracked between the towers. Her hand rested gently over her stomach. It had only been a few days since the ritual. Yet she already felt the change, not just in her body, but in her mind. Her guards entered quietly. One gave a short bow. "My queen, the human is asking to speak with you." Ziraven didn't turn. "Is he begging?" "No." He said, "He deserves answers." She closed her eyes, then spoke firmly. "Bring him." Mason Rell stood calmly when she arrived. The guards left them alone in the private audience hall. A long crystal room with glowing walls and a sharp echo. Ziraven walked toward him, slow and regal. "Why are you still here, human?" "You brought me." "You could have escaped," she said. "You've had chances." "I know," Mason replied. "But I'm not going to run from what I didn't ask for." She stopped. "Then you admit it." "You didn't plan this." Mason stepped forward, his voice steady. I didn't want this, Zyra. But it happened, and now I'm trying to understand what it means. Her eyes burned. You think I wanted this? She hissed. You think I wanted you? I never said that. I am queen of a dying race. I carried the burden of thousands. My womb was declared sacred, sealed by royal blood, untouched for centuries. She stepped closer, her voice trembling with fury. And you? A random man from a planet full of chaos and crude tools. Walk in and break every law of our world. Mason met her anger with calm. I didn't break anything. You changed. Me. Maybe, he said quietly. But maybe you were always meant to change. That silenced her. Just for a moment, she looked away. Lightning flashed behind her. I can't be weak, she said. You're not, he replied. I can't trust anyone. You don't have to, Mason said. But I'm still standing here. She turned toward him, breathing harder now. I'm scared. That single whisper shook the room more than thunder. I'm scared of this child, she said. Scared of how it's already changing me. Scared of what they'll say, what they'll do. Mason took a step forward. I am too. She looked up. But I won't let fear raise your child, he continued. And I won't let fear destroy something that might save your people. For a long time they stood in silence. Then she sat. Not on her throne. On the edge of the platform, like a person, not a queen. I was taught to destroy anything that made me feel weak. Mason sat across from her. Maybe now you're feeling human. Ziraven's lips twitched. Almost a smile. You're strange. Earth's full of surprises. She placed her hand over her stomach again. The child is strong, she said. It glows inside me. Mason nodded slowly. They said I shouldn't exist, she added. He leaned forward. Maybe that's why this happened, so you wouldn't be alone anymore. She looked at him for a long time, then said softly, If I let you stay, I must protect you. You don't have to, Mason said. But I will. Outside the tower, thunder rolled far away. But inside, the chamber, two beings, one human, one alien, finally stopped speaking as strangers and started listening as something more. The palace glowed quietly in the evening light. Tall towers reached toward the stars, their edges humming with soft energy. But deep inside the queen's walls, not every corner was loyal. Not every voice whispered peace, and not every heart accepted. Ziraven sat alone in her meditation hall, breathing slowly. The child within her pulsed with energy, stronger than she imagined possible. It no longer felt foreign. It felt hers. But outside those walls, her council of lords met in secret, and in that room her child was spoken of like a threat. He must be removed. He has clouded her judgment. She protects the human. He is turning her weak. First, the ritual. Now a child that is not Zavarin. This cannot be allowed to continue. They planned in whispers. Slow poison. A silent blade. A fake accident. Anything to restore order. But one voice in the dark disagreed. Captain Rena, commander of the Queen's personal guard, stepped forward. If you touch the Queen, she said coldly, you'll start a civil war. A noble snarled. Then we start one. Meanwhile, Mason sat in the royal garden. It was quiet. Peaceful. Too peaceful. He didn't trust it. Vines twisted through glowing flowers. Tiny lights floated like insects. He watched the sky change color. But he felt the danger growing behind him. Velik, a young Zavarin soldier, approached with caution. I should not speak to you, he said. Mason looked up. Then why are you? Velik hesitated, then handed him a tiny scroll. They plan to strike tonight. Leave. Or die. Mason stood quickly. His mind raced. He didn't run. He went straight to Ziraven. When he entered her chamber unannounced, the guards moved to stop him, but Ziraven waved them away. What is it? He showed her the scroll. Her face changed instantly. She didn't raise her voice. She simply whispered, So it begins. That night, the stars over Zavora burned brighter than usual. The nobles gathered. Again, but the queen was already prepared. Captain Rena surrounded the hall with loyal guards, Zira. Ven entered in full royal armor, her presence sharp as a blade. Mason walked behind her. Every eye in the chamber stared at him like he was poison. You plot against your own ruler, Zira Ven said coldly. And against my unborn child. A noble stood. You carry a mistake. Zira Ven stepped forward. No, I carry a future. One brave fool drew a weapon, but before it could charge, Rena struck him down with a shock spear. Another noble tried to flee, caught before he reached the door. Silence followed. Zira Ven stood tall. Let this be known, she said. Any who threatens the father of my child threatens the crown itself. Later that night, Zira Ven walked beside Mason in the moonlit hall. I warned them, she said. He nodded. You didn't have to protect me. She looked at him. Yes, I did. Mason slowed his steps. You know, you don't act like someone who never wanted this. She stopped walking. I didn't, she said, then added, but now. I can't imagine going through it alone. They didn't say anything else, but as they stood beneath the glowing night sky, the queen's hand gently brushed his, and didn't pull away. The wind outside Zavora's palace changed that night. It was sharp, cold, unnatural. Inside the royal chambers, Queen Zira Ven stood at her window, hand over her stomach. The unborn child inside her was glowing brighter now, responding to her emotions. Not fear, readiness. She sensed what was coming. So did Mason Rell. He stood in the Queen's private war room, surrounded by glowing maps and alien symbols. Beside him, Captain Rena adjusted her armored gauntlets. You're not military, she said. No, Mason replied. But I've fought to stay alive most of my life. She gave a short nod. Good. That's all survival is. Zira Ven entered the room dressed in her black royal armor. Elegant, flexible, deadly. You should leave, she told Mason quietly. Not this again, he replied. This isn't a palace argument, she said. This is war, and I'm still not walking away from my child, he said. Zira Ven blinked once, then slowly nodded. Far above Zavora, a ship moved behind the dark side of the moon. It didn't fly Zavoran colors. It carried no flags, but it did carry weapons. Outworlders. Mercenaries, paid in secrets and shadows, hired by the same nobles who failed to kill the queen from within. They had come to finish the job. As their dropships entered atmosphere, alarms blared across the royal towers. Red light flooded the halls. Guards ran to battle stations. Mason moved beside Rena and helped activate the palace shield system. This tech is incredible, he muttered. Then, help me keep it working, she said, throwing him a small wrist panel. Zira Ven took command on the upper platform. Let them come, she said. Let them test what happens when a queen stands with something new. Her people waited for orders, and the queen, who once stood alone, now had someone standing beside her. The dropships landed. Armored soldiers poured out, cold, silent, and fast. Their weapons burned blue as they cut through the first gate, but the palace shield held strong. For now, Mason and Rena worked side by side, rerouting power and reinforcing the outer defenses. At one panel, he paused. Your queen. She scares me sometimes. She scares everyone, Rena replied. Then added, that's why we follow her. But as they finished rerouting a power node, an explosion rocked the east wing. Mason stumbled. Shields down on that side, he shouted. They'll breach the inner halls. Zira Ven didn't wait. She grabbed her staff and leapt from the command platform, landing in the main court like a falling comet. The enemy troops stormed in. She met them head-on. One by one, she struck them down. Graceful, brutal, perfect. But when one attacker fired a shot meant for her back, Mason stepped in the way. He tackled the soldier, wrestled the weapon away, and slammed the attacker against the wall. His arm was burned, his breath ragged, but he stood. Zyraven turned. She saw his wound. She saw the pain, and she saw something else. He didn't do it for glory. He did it for her. Together they cleared the final attackers. The palace was bruised, but not broken. That night under the cracked skylight, Zyraven sat beside Mason, wrapping a cloth over his arm. "You're a fool," she whispered. "Maybe. You nearly died. You're worth it." She paused. "I don't need protection." He looked at her. "I know, but I gave it anyway." She touched his chest gently. "You're no longer a mistake." He took her hand. "And you're no longer alone." The sun rose over Zavora like never before. Golden light stretched across the spires of the royal city, touching broken walls, healed wounds, and silent statues that once stood for pride, but now meant change. Inside the queen's chamber there was no crown. Only silence. And a breath. A tiny, new breath. Queen Zyraven sat near the edge of her bed, her long hair flowing across her shoulders, silver eyes fixed on the soft bundle in her arms. The child was glowing, just a little, skin like hers, eyes not yet open, heartbeat steady and strong. And inside that fragile body was something no one had ever seen before, a future that didn't come from war, but from choice. Mason Rell stood quietly nearby. His arm was still bandaged. His face was tired, but in his eyes, there was peace. "She looks like you," he said softly. Zyraven smiled just a little. "She feels like both of us." For a while, neither of them spoke. Not because they didn't have words, but because they didn't need them. Zyraven looked down at her daughter again. "I thought I had to be unbreakable," she whispered. "Cold. Alone." Mason stepped closer. "You don't have to be that anymore." She looked up at him. "I don't want to be." Outside the chamber, news spread fast. The queen had delivered a child. Healthy, strong, half-human, and she had named her heir without the council's vote. Some whispered rebellion, others whispered hope. But no one moved, because for the first time, the queen wasn't standing behind walls. She was standing in the open, and beside her was the man no one could forget. A ceremony was held, small, quiet, no nobles, only guards, close friends, and one outsider, now protected by royal command. Zyraven stepped onto the speaking platform, her child in her arms, Mason at her side. She looked out at the gathering crowd. "My people," she said. "You feared I had lost control?" She paused. "I have." Gasps echoed. She continued. "I lost control of silence, of emptiness, of centuries of failure." She raised the child slightly. "And I gained life." Mason didn't speak. He didn't need to. She turned toward him, and in the sight of all, she placed her free hand over his heart and whispered, "You were never meant to rule beside me, but I cannot imagine ruling without you." The people didn't cheer. They stood still, and then, slowly, they bowed, not just to her, but to him too. Later that night, as stars returned to Zavora's skies, Zyraven and Mason walked together in the royal gardens, the child asleep in his arms. Zyraven whispered, "You could return to Earth now. You've done more than enough." He looked at her. "I already have a home." She smiled. "You're not afraid of staying?" He looked down at the baby. "Not anymore." They sat beneath the stars, the glow of their child resting between them. Queen who ruled alone, a human who stood against fear, and a child born from two different worlds, to prove they never had to be enemies again.